Right. Let's dive in today. And we're going deep on a topic that I think a lot of us have encountered in some way, shape, or form. It's depression.
Okay.
We've got this video here that does a really good job, I think, of trying to break it down, whether you're personally dealing with it or you want to understand it to help somebody else. It's
Okay.
really focused on clarity and giving you stuff you can actually use. So,
Yeah, I think one of the most important things to remember is that depression. It's not just feeling sad.
yeah.
It can really affect your ability to do your job,
Uh-huh.
your relationships, even just basic functions every day.
Yeah, it kind of has this ripple effect, doesn't it? It touches every part of your life. And one thing that struck me in the video is just how common this actually is. I mean,
Mhm.
millions of people around the world are dealing with this. It doesn't matter what your age is, your background, none of that.
And I think it's interesting that there's not just one type of depression. There's actually quite a few uh, subtypes, if you will.
Yeah.
And most people have heard of major depressive disorder.
Right.
But then you have persistent depressive disorder, which is kind of like this long-term low-grade sadness that lingers for a long time. And then you have, things like seasonal affective disorder. That's more tied to, the seasons changing. So almost like our brains have a little bit of, weather sensitivity to them.
Yeah, it's like our brains get a little bit of the winter blues too. So, okay, so there are multiple types of depression. But what actually causes this in the first place? I thought the video presented it kind of like a detective story, almost like a mystery to unravel, where you have multiple factors that kind of come together.
Yeah, I think it's a really good way to put it. I think a lot of people want to simplify it and say it's, A, B, or C. But, really the way I think about it is, your genetics kind of lay the groundwork, and then your life experiences build upon that. And then you have, environmental factors that kind of throw some curveballs.
Okay.
So, if you have a family history of depression, you're more likely to develop it yourself. It's kind of like inheriting, brown eyes or something.
So it's almost like you inherit this predisposition.
Exactly. But then on top of that, you have all these different life experiences.
Right.
Past trauma, chronic stress, even major life changes like moving, going to a new school.
Right.
All these things kind of stack up. And if it gets to be too much, you kind of overflow, and that's where the depression can come in.
It's like we have this stress bucket, and if it overflows, that's where we can start to see some of these effects. And it's not just psychological, right? There was a big part of the video that also talked about brain chemistry.
Yeah, for sure. There are chemicals in our brain called neurotransmitters that really play a big role in this.
Okay.
And some of the key ones are, serotonin, dopamine. They're kind of like messengers in your brain carrying these signals that regulate mood. And if those messengers get out of whack, well, your mood's going to go along with it.
It's almost like if your phone signal keeps dropping, right? Like eventually you're not going to be able to communicate. It's
Exactly.
the same thing with our brains.
Yeah.
So we've got genetics, we've got life experiences, brain chemistry. But then the video also brought up these environmental factors, and that one really surprised me.
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of people don't really consider. But, things like not getting enough sunlight can play a role. Even your diet, not eating enough nutritious foods.
Hmm.
And, even lack of exercise. Like all these things can actually contribute. And I think it's because, your brain's kind of like saying, hey, I need these things,
Right.
These are the building blocks for me to work properly.
It's like we're neglecting our brain's basic needs.
Yeah.
And then it protests with depression. And speaking of support, I thought it was really interesting how the video highlighted how important social connection is for preventing this. It's almost like it creates a buffer
Oh, for sure.
against these other factors.
Yeah. I think that's one of the most protective things we can have. Strong social bonds can help with emotional support, can reduce stress. It just makes us feel better overall. It's
Yeah.
like having this built-in resilient system.
Yeah, it's like having that support network that can really make a difference. Okay, so we've got a pretty good grasp on what causes this. But how do you know if you or someone you care about are actually dealing with depression? Like, how do you spot the signs?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, that's where understanding the symptoms comes in. And it's not just, feeling sad all the time. It can be a lot more nuanced than that.
So beyond just feeling sad, what are some of the things to watch out for?
Well, imagine waking up and feeling like you could sleep for a week straight,
Mm.
or maybe you can't sleep at all even though you're completely exhausted.
Mm.
That's the effect depression can have on your sleep.
Wow.
And it's not just sleep. Your appetite can go totally haywire, too.
Okay.
Some people lose interest in food altogether, while others, turn to food for comfort. And that can lead to, these big weight fluctuations either way.
So it's not just like I had a bad day, didn't sleep well. This is like a pattern. This is consistent.
Yeah, exactly. And it's almost like, your body's internal compass is totally off.
Right.
And then there's the fatigue. Imagine feeling like you're just drained all the time, like your battery's constantly at 1%.
Yeah.
And even simple tasks feel totally overwhelming.
It's like your body's permanently in low power mode.
Precisely. And then, there's these less obvious signs. You might experience like aches and pains, physical discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to come out of nowhere. Depression can actually manifest physically too. It's not just, in your head. It's a full body experience.
So it's important to listen to our bodies when they're telling us something might be wrong and not just dismiss those aches and pains. So we've got the physical stuff. What about, the impact on how we think?
Yeah. Well, depression can make it really hard to focus, hard to remember things, or even make decisions. It's almost like your brain is stuck in this fog.
So it's not just feelings, it's impacting my ability to actually think clearly.
Yeah, that's right. And then perhaps the most concerning symptom is having these intrusive thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And this could include thoughts of self-harm or even suicide. And if you're experiencing these things or someone you love is, it's really critical to reach out for help right away.
Absolutely. And this is where getting help from a professional is so important, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people try to self-diagnose, and that's really not enough, because depression can look so many different ways, and a professional can really help you determine, what's the best course of treatment for you.
And speaking of treatment, I was really encouraged to see that the video kind of offered a few different options, which makes you realize, okay, it's not a dead end. There are things that can be done.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk about some of those options. What would be kind of the first steps towards healing?
Well, often the first step is psychotherapy, which is basically talking with a mental health professional.
Okay.
And it's really about unraveling these tangled thoughts and feelings that are contributing to your depression.
So what does that actually look like? I mean, is there one type of therapy? Are there many? Like what does that talking actually look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the video kind of highlights two main approaches. One is called cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT.
Okay.
And you can kind of think of CBT like a personal trainer for your brain.
Oh, okay.
It helps you to identify those negative thought patterns we talked about earlier, those thought traps that keep you stuck.
Yeah.
And so you learn to recognize them, you learn to challenge them, and you learn to replace them with, more helpful and more realistic thoughts.
So it's almost like retraining your brain to think in a healthier way?
Exactly. It's about building up your mental fitness. And then there's another type of therapy called psychodynamic therapy. And this one digs a little deeper. It's kind of like an archaeological expedition into your past, exploring how, early experiences and relationships might be playing a role in your current struggles.
So it's understanding the roots of where these feelings are coming from. Fascinating. And then the video also talked about medication, specifically antidepressants.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, antidepressants basically work by adjusting those neurotransmitters we were talking about, those brain messengers that affect your mood.
Right.
You can kind of think about it as fine-tuning the signals in your brain.
Mm-hmm.
And, common types are things like SSRIs and SNRIs, and they work on slightly different pathways, but they all have the same goal, which is to kind of, boost your mood and help to reduce those symptoms.
So it's literally working on that chemical imbalance that we were talking about earlier.
That's right. But, it's important to remember that medication is usually most effective when it's combined with therapy.
Got it.
So it's kind of like a two-pronged approach.
Yeah.
You're addressing both the biological and the psychological aspects at the same time.
So it's not just about popping a pill. It's about a more holistic approach to dealing with this.
Exactly. And then there's the whole lifestyle piece, which is really about, giving you the power to take an active role in your own well-being.
Okay. I like that.
And you can kind of think about this as, building a foundation of good habits that support your mental health.
So things like exercise, diet, sleep, those all come into play here.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Regular exercise is like magic for your brain. It releases all those feel-good chemicals that lift your mood. And, a healthy diet provides the building blocks that your brain needs to function correctly. And you can kind of think about it as, putting premium fuel in your brain rather than, junk food.
Right, you've got to fuel it properly.
Exactly. And then, we can't forget about sleep.
Right.
It's kind of like hitting the reset button for your brain and your body, allowing them to recharge and repair.
It's amazing to think that those everyday choices we make can have such a big impact.
Yeah, it really highlights how interconnected the mind and body truly are.
Yeah.
And the video also talks about mindfulness and meditation as really powerful tools.
So it's not just what we put into our bodies, but how we train our minds as well.
Yeah, exactly. Mindfulness is all about paying attention to the present moment without judging it. And that can help to kind of quiet those racing thoughts that often accompany depression.
Okay.
And meditation is like a mental workout that kind of strengthens your ability to focus and to regulate your emotions. It's about finding that inner peace and calm even when things are, kind of chaotic around you.
It's like finding that eye of the storm.
Yeah, exactly.
So it sounds like we've got all these different strategies that we can use, and maybe the most effective approach is combining these different elements together.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And the good news is that there are a lot of practical things that you can do in your everyday life to cope with depression. Things that you can start using right away.
All right, give us the toolkit. What are some of those things that people can start using today to make a difference?
Well, one of the simplest but most effective things is just establishing those daily routines. Even small, consistent actions can really bring a sense of order and control when everything else feels totally chaotic.
Okay, so even little things like what? Give us an example.
Yeah, so, think about setting a regular wake-up time or, scheduling those short walks, planning out your meals. These might seem like little things, but
Right.
They can make a huge difference.
It's about creating some structure, some predictability.
Exactly. It's like giving your brain a roadmap to follow when it feels totally lost.
I like that. Okay, so what else? What else is in the toolkit?
Well, another really important thing is finding healthy ways to express your emotions.
Okay.
Because if you bottle things up, they're only going to get worse.
So what does that look like?
Well, journaling can be a really great outlet. It's like having a private conversation with yourself where you can process your thoughts and feelings without any judgment. You can also get creative. You can do things like painting or writing, playing music. It's really about finding a channel for those emotions to flow through. And of course, talking to a trusted friend or a therapist can be incredibly helpful.
Right.
Just having somebody listen and validate your feelings can really make a huge difference.
Yeah, sometimes just saying it out loud makes a world of difference.
Absolutely. And speaking of connection, we can't emphasize enough how vital social support is when you're struggling with depression. It's about combating that sense of isolation that can really make things feel so much worse.
It's like a lifeline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Spending time with loved ones, joining a support group, even engaging in activities you enjoy with others. Those can really make you feel less alone and more connected to the world around you.
I remember when I was going through a really tough time, and just even going for walks with a friend and just being able to talk about things made a huge difference.
Yeah.
It's like having a teammate in your corner.
Yeah. And that's such an important point. You don't have to go through this alone.
Right. Exactly. Okay, so we've talked a lot about what individuals can do for themselves, but what about the people around them? What can friends and family do to support someone who's dealing with depression?
That's a great question, and that's something that we're actually going to explore more in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
Supporting someone with depression, it can be challenging.
Right.
But it's also incredibly rewarding, and it's really about offering empathy, understanding and practical support without judgment.
So stay tuned, listeners. We're going to equip you with all the tools you need to be the best support system possible for your loved ones. We'll see you in part 2. Welcome back to our deep dive on depression.
And we're picking up right where we left off, talking about how to support someone you care about who's dealing with this.
And one thing that really stood out to me from the video was this idea that it's not about trying to fix them. It's more about being a non-judgmental presence in their life.
Yeah, I think that's so crucial.
Yeah.
It's really easy to fall into that trap of wanting to offer advice or say things like just think positive.
Right.
But that can actually make the person feel worse.
Yeah.
Like their feelings aren't valid.
Because, I mean, let's face it, if it were that easy to snap out of it, nobody would be dealing with depression in the first place.
Exactly. So instead of trying to fix it, focus on validating their experience.
Yeah.
Let them know it's okay to feel what they're feeling.
Right.
That you're there to listen without judgment.
Okay, that makes sense. So how do we actually do that? Like, how do you be a supportive presence in a way that's actually helpful?
Well, I think active listening is really key.
Okay.
Put your phone away, make eye contact, and really, really try to tune into what they're saying. Not just the words, but the emotions behind them.
It's about making them feel safe to open up.
Exactly. And try to resist that urge to jump in with solutions or platitudes.
Right.
Sometimes the most helpful thing you can say is simply, that sounds really hard. I'm here for you.
Right. Just acknowledge their pain and let them know that they're not alone in it.
Exactly. And I know it's tempting to offer advice, but ultimately it's up to the person to decide what's best for them. You can gently suggest things like therapy or medication, but don't push them.
What if they're resistant to that? What if they don't want to go to therapy? The video talked about that a little bit too, and how common that is.
Yeah, I think that's a really common reaction. And it often comes from, stigma or fear or just a lack of understanding about what therapy is.
Yeah.
You can try to address their concerns.
Okay.
Maybe share some information about different types of therapy or debunk some myths about medication.
Right.
But ultimately, it's about respecting their autonomy while still being supportive.
It's that balance, right, of respecting their choices, but also encouraging them to look at all the options.
Exactly. And, another thing that the video really emphasized is patience.
Okay.
Depression isn't a quick fix. It's a journey. It has its ups and downs.
It's tempting to want to see them better right away, but it's a process.
It is. And there are going to be setbacks and moments of despair and times when it feels like the progress is really slow. But your role is to just, be that steady presence, a source of encouragement and understanding, even when it's tough.
It's like being their anchor,
I love that analogy.
Like when the seas are rough.
Yeah. And remember, your support can be incredibly powerful. It can really be the difference between giving up and holding on to hope.
So we've talked a lot about supporting others, but what about taking care of ourselves in the process? I know the video also talked about self-care.
Yeah, self-care is absolutely essential, both for, the person who's experiencing depression and for the people who are supporting them. It's like that old saying, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Because if you're running on fumes, you're not going to be much help to anyone.
Exactly. It's like the oxygen mask on an airplane.
Right.
You have to put yours on first before you can help anyone else.
So what are some of the self-care things that we should be doing?
Well, it goes back to those fundamentals we talked about earlier: exercise, diet, and sleep.
Okay.
Make sure you're prioritizing those things.
Yeah.
Even when it feels difficult.
Because those aren't just good for our physical health, but our mental well-being too.
That's right. And don't underestimate the power of, stress management techniques.
Right.
The video talked about mindfulness, meditation, relaxation exercises. Those can be really helpful for kind of calming the mind and reducing anxiety.
It's about finding those moments of peace and quiet when the world feels chaotic.
Absolutely. And don't forget to make time for things that bring you joy.
Yeah.
Whether it's hobbies or spending time in nature, connecting with loved ones who lift you up.
Right. It's about nurturing yourself.
Exactly.
So you have the energy to support others.
And sometimes, self-care also means setting boundaries.
Okay.
It's okay to say no sometimes, even to people you love, if it means protecting your own mental and emotional well-being.
It's not being selfish. It's recognizing your limits.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that kind of leads us to the concept of resilience. which the video also touched on.
Okay.
And it's really about developing the ability to bounce back from adversity,
Yeah.
to navigate challenges without falling apart.
So it's not about being invincible, but about having the tools to cope when things get tough.
Exactly. Resilience is kind of like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
I like that.
And the video highlights some key ways to kind of build that resilience muscle.
All right, let's hear them. How do we get more resilient?
Well, first and foremost, nurture your social connections. Having those people you can rely on, people who understand and care, that can really provide a buffer against stress and isolation.
Right.
It's kind of like having that safety net when you're walking a tightrope.
It's knowing that you've got people there to catch you if you fall.
Exactly. And another really important aspect of resilience is learning to challenge those negative thoughts.
Okay.
It's easy to get caught up in a spiral of self-criticism and pessimism, but those thoughts, they often distort reality.
So it's about recognizing those thought patterns and trying to reframe them in a more positive or realistic way.
Exactly. And it takes practice, but with the help of therapy or even just some self-help techniques, you can learn to identify those negative thoughts and replace them with more helpful ones.
It's like training your inner critic to be a little bit kinder.
Yeah, exactly. And another strategy the video highlights is focusing on your strengths and your accomplishments. When you're feeling down, it's easy to forget all the good things about yourself and all the things that you've achieved.
It's like giving yourself a little pep talk.
Yeah.
Reminding yourself what you're capable of.
Acknowledge your strengths and remind yourself that you've overcome challenges in the past and you can do it again.
You've got this.
Yeah. And finally, don't forget about the importance of physical health.
Right.
We've already talked about how exercise, diet, and sleep are so crucial for mental well-being.
Yeah, it's taking care of your body so it can take care of your mind.
Exactly. When you prioritize your physical health, you're really laying a strong foundation for resilience. It's like building a house on solid ground.
Okay.
It can withstand those storms much better.
So it sounds like building resilience is an ongoing process.
It is. It's not something that happens overnight.
Right.
It's a journey of self-discovery and growth and continuous learning. But the good news is that, we can all become more resilient with time and effort.
And it's a journey worth taking.
It is.
Both for ourselves and for the people that we care about.
Absolutely. And remember, we're not meant to go through this alone. Having that supportive community around us can really make all the difference.
It takes a village.
Exactly. And speaking of villages, we're going to wrap up this part of our deep dive here. But don't worry, we'll be back with the final part and more insights soon.
Stay tuned, listeners. We still have more ground to cover. We'll see you in part 3. Welcome back, deep divers. We're in the final stretch now of our exploration of depression, and I feel like I've learned so much.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it?
It has.
From the different types and causes to all those coping strategies, I think we've really covered a lot of ground.
And I especially appreciated how we balance that personal action with also acknowledging that sometimes professional help is really key.
Yeah, I think that was a really important point that the video made too. It's almost like, we've been assembling this toolkit throughout this deep dive.
Right.
But sometimes you need an expert to guide you on how to use those tools, effectively.
It makes me think of like those really complicated IKEA furniture instructions. Like you could try to figure it out yourself, but sometimes you just need that extra help.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And when it comes to mental health, I think that extra help, comes in the form of therapists, counselors, psychiatrists, those trained professionals.
Right.
Who can provide, that personalized guidance and support.
So how do you know when it's time to call in those experts?
Yeah.
When do you need to reach out for that extra help?
Well, the video had some really clear indicators. If you're finding that your symptoms are really sticking around and they're getting in the way of your daily life, that's a big red flag.
Okay.
If you're struggling to concentrate at work, you're withdrawing from friends and family, or even, you're neglecting those basic self-care tasks. Or if you're experiencing, those more serious symptoms that we talked about earlier, like thoughts of self-harm or suicide, those require immediate attention from a professional.
And I think it's important to remember that seeking help is not a sign of weakness.
Yeah.
It's actually a sign of strength.
Absolutely. It takes courage to admit that you need support. And it's a testament to your commitment to your own well-being.
Now, the video talked about, there are different types of mental health professionals, and honestly, it can be a little overwhelming to know where to start.
Yeah, I agree. It can feel a bit like a maze. But, I think a good first step is often just reaching out to your primary care doctor.
Okay.
They can provide referrals, point you towards resources in your area.
And I know there are also, online directories and resources that can help you find therapists who specialize in specific areas, whether it's depression or anxiety or whatever you're dealing with.
Another thing to consider is what kind of therapy feels right for you. Some people really thrive in individual therapy while others find, group settings more supportive.
Everybody's journey is different, right?
Exactly. And it's so important to find a therapist who's a good fit for you. Someone who you feel comfortable with, and who you trust.
It's kind of like finding the right pair of shoes,
Yeah.
You want something that's gonna fit well and support you.
Yeah. I love that. And it's okay if the first therapist you see isn't the perfect match.
Right.
It's perfectly fine to shop around until you find someone who feels right.
So the key message is, don't be afraid to reach out for help.
Yeah.
There are resources available. There are people who care and want to support you in this journey.
Exactly. And the sooner you reach out, the sooner you can begin that process of healing and recovery.
Well, deep divers, we've reached the end of our deep dive into depression. It's been a journey of understanding, reflection, and hopefully empowerment for all of us.
We've explored this complex condition from so many different angles.
We have.
We've debunked some common myths, and most importantly, I think we've highlighted those many pathways to healing and resilience.
And if there's one message that we want you to take away from this deep dive, it's that you are not alone. There is hope, and there is help available.
Remember, knowledge is power. And understanding is that first step towards overcoming any challenge.
So keep those deep diving brains engaged.
Yeah.
Keep learning, keep exploring, and most importantly, keep taking care of yourselves and each other.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time, stay curious, stay compassionate, and stay well.